live.
We ready?
We are ready.
Okay. Well, I'll get started. So my name's Dr. Elizabeth Seymour. I am a board-certified family medicine physician. I work in Richardson, Texas, not too far from here. I'm also certified in functional medicine, and many people don't really know what functional medicine is, but that's a more integrative, holistic approach. I don't like to say alternative because it's not alternative medicine, it's real medicine. And then I'm also specialized in environmental medicine, and many patients have never heard, and even regular doctors don't know what environmental medicine is. So environmental medicine is dealing with patients that have problems with exposures to things in their environment. Could be something as simple as allergies, could be food allergies, could be chemical sensitivity, could be weird stuff like electromagnetic field type of sensitivity where people wear tinfoil hats, but this is an issue that I deal with every day in my practice. We see people from all over the world, all over every state in the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. So we're going to talk tonight about heavy metal toxicity and heavy metal exposure and how that can have a bad or heavy effect on your bones. And my website, my phone number is here. I have only 4 business cards, so don't shoot me because I didn't bring 30. All right, so there's multiple metals that we're going to talk about. I'll show you a diagram of all the different metals that can be tested, but we're only going to focus on 4 of the most common ones: lead, mercury, arsenic, and cadmium. So this is just a gentle exposure graph that's showing if you have an acute toxicity. If you, for instance, break a thermometer, an old school thermometer in your hand, and mercury's floating all around, it can get absorbed in your skin. That could be an acute toxicity, and the metal levels go up with the exposure, and immediately in your blood levels you can have very high serum blood levels of mercury. But then over time, as time goes by, and that could be days, weeks, months, years, your kidneys and your detoxification pathways start to get the metals out through your urine and stool and sweating and many other ways. Okay? So the first one we're going to talk about is lead. I put the picture. I don't think people really care about what lead looks like, but that's a diagram of what lead looks like when it comes out of the earth. So you can get toxic from lead from multiple sources. The most common is going to be your tap water. Now, we don't want to talk about this, okay? And I'm going to talk about controversial things. Obviously, our water is probably better than, let's say, the country of Mexico, okay? But the reality is we use a lot of chemicals, chlorine, fluorination, to treat our water, and that's to kill bacteria and such, but also lead exposures and lead levels can go up in that. You can get lead exposure from cigarette smoke. We see a lot of patients that smoke cigarettes, unfortunately still today, or have smoked cigarettes, and they say, well, how can I have heavy metal toxicity? Because there are heavy metals within the cigarettes and the vapors that you smoke. Hair dyes. I'm going naturally gray, slowly but surely, with a 17-year-old who's given me 4 of those gray hairs. But hair dyes you have to be careful with. Basically any type of cosmetic, when it gets its red and its purples and its pinks, it has to come from some type of metal to give you that shimmer and that sheer and that shine. Pipes, obviously lead pipes, gasoline. We'll talk about in the days when, before I was born, 1982, but back in the 70s when they went from leaded gas to unleaded gas. I obviously don't remember this. Many of you probably do. There are glazes and pesticides you can use within your home, occupational exposures, battery manufacturers, and other big industries. Okay? So there are a list of symptoms that you can have with lead toxicity. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I did highlight in yellow the big players that have to do with your bone health. So if you have arthritis, it could be caused by lead toxicity. If you have back problems, that could be anything: compression fractures, back pain, nerve problems from your backs and the structure of your bones, tooth decay, because your teeth are bones as well. So it's not just you didn't brush your teeth right or you didn't floss enough. It could be from heavy metal toxicity. So the use of lead paint was pretty common until it was banned in 1977. So you hear about, don't eat paint chips, kid. And if you lived in a home that was built before 1977, and had some type of lead paint on it, you could be exposed that way. Like I said, there's pigments that are used. They still use it for outdoor paints just because it is more weather resistant and it lasts longer, and it gives bright colors. And then it's also used in, like I said, it was used in additives in gasoline, and still to this day in several countries. I don't know exactly which ones those were, but the USD regulated it back in the 1970s, and we've moved forward since then to unleaded gas. So health concerns, you can have a congenital exposure. That can be from if the mom is pregnant with their child or your grandchild, and if she has heavy metal toxicity, then that can pass through the placenta and go to the baby. There's a condition called pica, which I'll show you a picture of. It is basically where people eat dirt, and it's not that, that's a rare condition that people have a craving to eat dirt. If you're iron deficient or anemic, sometimes you crave ice, sonic ice. But pica is a condition where you can get exposure to eating soil, and it doesn't have to be a lot of soil. I mean, it can be as much as less than a tablespoon or a teaspoon. And imagine kids playing in a garden or playing outside in the dirt, and they put it in their mouth. They don't necessarily have the condition or the diagnosis of pica, but they get exposed to the soil and the lead within the soil. It can lead to developmental delays. And clinical studies have shown that lead that accumulates in the body has a negative effect on the bones. It decreases what we call the cortical width and the bone density, increasing your fracture risk. That's why I'm here tonight, and that's why OsteoStrong is so important. And I have my references in case you want to look that up. So pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, basically it's lead gets distributed throughout your body, but the tissues, what tissues are those exactly? The bones, and again, why I said, and I highlighted it in yellow, the bone, the teeth, the liver, the lungs, the kidneys, the brain, the spleen, all these areas can be a source of mobilizing lead. And it crosses the blood-brain barrier. So this is why it's a concern when you have a baby. They always test the baby for lead toxicity, and at 1 year old, your pediatricians or family physicians should be testing them for lead toxicity, because every 1/10 of a microgram that the lead levels are up, their IQ points go down, okay, leading to mental retardation or intellectual disabilities. You do excrete it through your kidneys. Only about 30 milliequivalents a day, but if you have problems with your kidneys or if you don't have normal bowel movements, you can also secrete it through your feces, then you'll continue to have a buildup. So clinical manifestations, the acute toxicity, if you just happen to be really toxic and exposed to lead for whatever reason, you can have something called encephalopathy, which means you're losing your mind, you're out of your mind. Doesn't mean necessarily that you have dementia or anything like that. It's an acute toxicity where I don't want to say go crazy, but you cognitively are impaired. And then it can lead to renal failure. You can have GI symptoms that are severe, such as diarrhea, because your body's trying to get the toxin out. Long-term effects and long-term toxicity or chronic toxicity, the reason this happens is lead has an affinity for something called sulfur groups, and it's toxic to the zinc-dependent enzymes within your body. So you have to have zinc for many different, it's a cofactor for many different enzymatic processes within your body, and lead competes with that. So a lot of times I get a question, well, should I just take a bunch of zinc to offset my lead? And minerals are very important to help offset lead and all heavy metal toxicity. But it affects the hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is your blood that carries your oxygen, so you can be at risk for problems with anemia. It affects steroid metabolism. Not that we're pumping up on doing steroids or anything like that, but we all produce natural steroids called cortisol in our body every day from our adrenal glands. It'll affect your membrane integrity, which is your cellular membranes. You have trillions of cells in your body. Every cell has a cell membrane. It can affect that. And it also will affect vitamin D synthesis. And the reason I highlighted this in yellow is because if you have osteoporosis, you need to make sure that you're taking some form of vitamin D deficiency if you have vitamin D deficiency, documented on blood tests. Because that's very important to help you absorb your calcium. And I'll get into other things with nutrients. You should be taking D3 with vitamin K2, because K2 helps keep the calcium that's absorbed by vitamin D into your bones, not if you had breasts that had a calcification, or a coronary artery or a carotid artery that had calcification, then that starts leading to atherosclerosis and problems with surgeries and stents and biopsies and not good stuff. All right, so this is just a diagram. I'm sorry it's kind of small, but it shows you the difference between adults and children and what's the effect of lead on the body. 10 micrograms in adults, you can have hypertension. How many of us in the room have hypertension? You don't have to raise your hand, but I'm sure it's at least 50 or 60%. It's one of the most common conditions I treat. When it inhibits your heme synthesis, you're going to have a lower delivery of oxygen. You're going to be more likely to be anemic. It will increase systolic blood pressure or hypertension. It'll impair your hearing. How many of us as we get older we lose our hearing? Well, it's just because of old age? Not necessarily. Could be something like heavy metal toxicity, or it could be that we listened to too much punk rock as a child and too loud. Okay. It can cause infertility in males. It can cause renal or kidney dysfunction. Neuropathy. Neuropathy is when you have the numbness, the tingling, the burning that starts usually in your hands or feet, and they don't really know why you have it unless you have diabetes or some reason to have a nerve effect, but it's very painful. Fatigue, headaches, abdominal pain, tremors, and then if you get very high, 100 micrograms per deciliter, then you'll have lethargy, seizures, and the encephalopathy and the confusion that we talked about. In children, impaired IQ at 10 micrograms. Okay, so another thing I'll bring up too is, and I'm not against any municipality, be it Corinth or Denton or Carrollton or Louisville or Dallas or Richardson, but when you get your municipality reports, you can look at your water levels, and it will say that there's a specific level of lead in there, and they will say, well, it's acceptable based on the EPA ratings. But I always talk about how to get clean water and make sure that you're getting clean water and filtering your water. Again, impairing nerve conduction velocity, impairs vitamin D synthesis or metabolism, hemoglobin synthesis. You can have a colicky baby that has abdominal pain and you're just like, oh, what can I do? Neuropathy, encephalopathy, anemia, nephropathy, which is kidney failure, and seizures in a child or a baby. So it's very important. It's extremely toxic. And then again, this is just a diagram showing that the differences in the blood levels and following up on child-based blood levels. If a child is less than 9 micrograms, it's not considered to be lead poisoning, but as it goes from 10 to 14, now to 15, now to 20 to 45 and greater than 70, that a lead poisoning would be a medical emergency and that environmental management must begin immediately if you see a level over 70 in a child. All right, so the average lead level in American children is less than 2, which is good. The lower the better. You definitely don't want 10 or 9 even. Up to almost 9% of children have had lead poisoning in their bodies. And lead toxicity is more prevalent in minority groups and among those that live in the Northeast. And you would think about that because of poverty, because of poor, cleaning and filtering of your water, because the Northeast was built first. It's much older. It's got old lead pipes. So, and then again, neurotoxicity in children, mental retardation can occur in severe lead intoxication, and every point that goes down, it goes down 5 points in your IQ with every 10 milligram equivalent per deciliter of blood level in the population. I would always bring this up, the other developmental outcomes. Your children can be aggressive. They can be hyperactive. How many children that we know have ADD or attention deficit hyperactivity? They're bouncing off the walls. Is it because what they ate, too much sugar, or could it be lead toxicity? Antisocial behaviors I worry about with our criminals and people going to jail and getting arrested. And then learning disabilities. It impairs your memory, your auditory processing, your visual motor integration. So these are the children that have dyslexia and dysgraphia and problems with visual and communication and interpreting. And we have a lot of learning disabilities as well. So I'll give you a case study. This was actually one of my patients in my office. Really good case study. He was 28-year-old male in the military. He was in the Afghan war. Came into my office. His job duty was to be a sharpshooter. So he was really good with guns and he trained all the snipers and did all the ballistic kind of stuff with that. What they did was go to Afghanistan during the war and they obviously, it's in the middle of the desert, so they popped up things. So they had a pop-up gun range. Well, the gun range didn't have any ventilation, no ventilation. So you can imagine you've got, I don't know, 50, 20, 100 soldiers in there shooting off hundreds and thousands of rounds every day, and those are leaded bullets, and you're breathing in the smoke, the gun smoke, and he got acutely lead toxic. So he would tell us, he would actually get up with a whiteboard and he would try to teach, and he couldn't articulate, he couldn't think. He literally felt like he was 100 and had dementia, and he was losing his mind. He couldn't write. So he went to the Afghan medical area there in Afghanistan, got a blood level drawn with an extremely high level, off the charts on blood, and he was sent to Walter Reed. Walter Reed medically discharged him honorably, but he was medically discharged because of lead toxicity. So I said, well, why are you here in Dallas to see me? He goes, well, you're the only doctor that I can find that does chelation. I said, are you serious? That's it? So I had to do pretty significant chelation on him to get him to, and I'll explain what chelation is. Chelation is the process of removing metals out of your body, but I'll explain what that is. So good thing about him now, I said, well, what are you going to do now that you're not a soldier and you can't go fight? And he says, well, I'm actually a bodyguard. I said, a bodyguard for who? He goes, this little band called the Eagles. And I go, oh, well, when the Eagles come to town, please let Dr. Seymour know. All right, so treatment for lead toxicity is going to be your environmental infection, hazard reduction, make sure that you don't use lead paint and that you try to clean up your environment. There are nutritional supplements, some that I talked about, vitamin D3, K2, and then chelation therapy. And again, I'll explain chelation because there's going to be some questions about that. Next, we have arsenic. That's what arsenic looks like. It's another common environmental source, most common from the ground and groundwater. And you have to understand, when we're doing mining and pulling minerals and ores and things out of the ground, these are where these minerals and these heavy metals come from. Any type of industrial process, semiconductors, fossil fuels, woods that are treated with arsenic preservatives, smelting, copper, zinc, lead, refining metals, ores, and glass manufacturing. This is just another list of the wood preservatives, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, foods like seafood and fish that you eat. And then there's some folk remedies that I haven't really ever seen here in the U.S., but there's certain countries like Africa and South America that use specific type of powders that are basically full of lead and arsenic, and people get very sick from that. So soil pica or pica, it's a problem when children ingest large amounts of soil. So right here, like I said, up to 1 teaspoon or 5,000 milligrams, they can have arsenic poisoning just from that much, a little bitty teaspoon. Children 1 or 2 years old have the strongest soil pica behavior, which occurs mostly because they're exploring their environment. They don't know that you're not supposed to eat dirt. But it is good to play in dirt because there's a lot of good microbes and normal bacteria, and not just be clean and OCD and wash our hands all day and never have a little bit of dirt exposure. But we don't want to be eating it. And then some preschool children may eat soil for unknown reasons, and then cultures sometimes have cultural reasons and rituals of why they literally feed dirt to the children, or clay. It's a part of a practice. So multiple manifestations of arsenic poisoning: thirst, low blood volume, low blood pressure, metallic taste or garlic taste, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, blood in your urine, blood problems on the blood counts that you do, a cough, chest pain, edema, dyspnea, which means shortness of breath, jaundice, central necrosis, protein in your urine, acute renal failure. Many different systems but it's specifically your detoxing organs, which are your kidneys and your GI systems, that get affected. And it can happen within minutes and lead on to hours or weeks and days. This is a condition, I got this picture from India. It's called palmar keratosis, where there was arsenic poisoning because the well waters were contaminated, and they start to get this brown spot all over their hands. It's called palmar keratosis. Don't see it very often. You can have these on your back and other skin areas, but generally not all on the hands only. So the biological monitoring, if you ingest seafood, you may have elevated arsenic levels. Now, this doesn't mean you can never have scallops or salmon or tuna or whatever it is you eat in regards to seafood, but just know that when you eat seafood, the risk of getting metal toxicity will go up, and I'll explain a little bit more of that as I get onto mercury. So arsenic inhibits proliferation of your cells, and it causes a condition called apoptosis, which is when the cell goes into cell death, specifically in the bone marrow. And the bone marrow derived mesenchymal cells and osteoblasts and chondrocytes, these are all different types of cells that build up and break down, build up new bone and break down bad bone so that new bone can be built up. It inhibits that significantly. So the treatment of acute poisoning with arsenic is something called gastric lavage. Not a fun time. You go to the ER and you get your stomach pumped. Not fun. They do this a lot for people that try to overdose on Tylenol and things like that. You get your stomach pumped. They'll give you charcoal, but it doesn't bind very well to inorganic arsenic. They'll do something called whole bowel irrigation with polyethylene glycol, which is a laxative that you have to drink, and it'll make you go to the bathroom. And then if you have your skin contamination, like the person with the palmar keratosis, they just do flushing and wiping and washing down the skin to decontaminate it. So really there's not much you can do besides supportive care that we just talked about and chelation therapy. So chelation is either a pill or an IV that you get. Some of these are actual supplements online that you can purchase. You don't have to physically come see me for chelation, but some of these are actual prescriptions, and you don't need to memorize the acronyms. They're called DMSA and DMPS and EDTA, but those are different types of medications that go in your body, and they pull metals out of the cell and out of the brain and out of the liver and out of the kidneys, and then you start to, and it's in the bloodstream, and then you start to excrete it out into your bowels and urine, your feces and your urine. All right, so then the next one is cadmium. Pretty shiny, silvery looking thing. It's again in the Earth's crust, and it exists as a small particle within the air, and it goes back to the similar things with arsenic, smoldering, smelting, high industrial temperatures. It's a byproduct of smelting zinc and lead and copper ores. It's mainly used in metal plants, producing pigments, batteries, plastics, and such. That's why I put a battery down there. So this is in Colorado, Summitville Mine in Colorado. Cadmium is a byproduct of those smelters. I didn't put one in here in Texas. I honestly don't know if we have. I know we have copper production in Denton, and I think there was a battery industrial place in Frisco, Plano-ish area. It may be closed now, but we still do get exposure. Tobacco smoke, big reason. And just one pack a day, smokers will absorb 5 to 10 times the amount as absorbed from a normal daily exposure. So it increases it significantly. So how do we become toxic? Cigarettes can cause it. And basically, if a person has cadmium toxicity, there's a good chance that they're going to have many other heavy metals within their body that I've been talking about: arsenic, lead, possibly mercury. Studies show that cadmium poisoning causes renal failure and osteoporosis and may increase your fracture risk. These again are my references. So you mostly will get exposure by mouth through foods, and it's just a small amount that gets absorbed. There's another condition called ida disease where you get cadmium contamination, and then if you also have a low diet with poor calcium mineral and low vitamin D, then you can get diagnosed with that disease. And then there's another component of cadmium toxicity called Chufong Takuan, and it's sold illegally as a miracle herb, probably in an Asian country. I'm assuming China or somewhere, but a lot of people will buy supplements online that have miracle cures. Okay, so these are the body areas that are affected by cadmium, and you've got your bone areas: arthritis, impaired bone healing, osteoporosis, But really, we're focused mostly on bones tonight just because we're at OsteoStrong. All of these can create many different disease processes within many organs, your hormones, your cardiovascular system, your neurologic system. So there really is no known benefit or good function to the human body when you're exposed to cadmium. It is transported in the blood. Its greatest concentrations are going to be found in your kidney and your liver. It's excreted through the kidneys with urine very slowly, and the biological half-life can be up to 30 years. Okay, so very important why people go, well, I don't know how, I don't think I've been exposed. It can build up. It affects your lungs, your kidneys, it affects your skeletal system, and it competes with the calcium binding site. So if you have a metal that's competing with the calcium that you take, either via pill or what you get in your diet, then it affects the regulation of proteins, and you can be low in calcium. These are just showing quickly renal effects, which are your kidney function. It reduces your glomerular filtration rate. It can cause kidney stones. Skeletal effects, it can cause a condition called osteomalacia, osteoporosis, increases your urinary calcium and phosphorus excretion, which are all these minerals that you need to have. And this is the little girl, I assume she may be in Africa, where she's got pica, so she's playing in the dirt, and then all it takes is a teaspoon or so. You can get bronchitis, you can get interstitial pneumonitis, you can get pulmonary edema if you inhale it. And then again, I've kind of beat a dead horse: renal dysfunction, bone disease, anemia, teeth problems. If your teeth turn yellow, it could be from cadmium. So how do we check it? We do a 24-hour urine cadmium level, and again, I'm going to show you what those values look like. And same thing with your exposures and your treatments. There really is no proven treatment for acute cadmium exposure. It's supportive care, it's oxygen, it's fluid hydration. It may be gastric lavage and pumping your stomach. It could be things that cause you to, what we call emesis, to vomit. And then charcoal is not really effective either as a binder if you take charcoal. So it's very important that you don't get cadmium exposure. All right, last one is mercury. This is a controversial one. So how do we become toxic with mercury? It could be dental amalgams. My dad was a dentist. He's retired. He's 91, and he used to say, "Oh, I don't think those cause problems." But I've learned since then. This is what most people's mouths looks like if they had real good dentists that put these fillings in: silver fillings, metal amalgams. And these are the newer ones that the dentists are using, which are the composite and mercury-free. You can also get these from thermometers, fish, shellfish, medications, air pollution, manufacturing of paper, chlorine, adhesives, fabric softeners, waxes. It's very controversial. The other one is vaccines. So I'm not up here saying that every vaccine is going to cause heavy metal toxicity, but there was a very big problem at least 10 or 20 years ago. Maybe it started in the 90s, where there was a mercury called thimerosal in MMR vaccines. And a lot of parents came out and said, this is making my child sick. Could it cause autism? I mean, a lot of controversial stuff. And so what the pharmaceutical companies said, okay, well, we'll take out the thimerosal as a binder and adjuvant within the vaccine, and we'll change it to aluminum. And so if any of y'all have read the End of the Alzheimer's Epidemic by Dr. Bresden, he talks about aluminum toxicity. So to me, it's kind of like, well, are we trading, one bad thing for another? I'm not sure, but they're trying to do the best. And they will say, well, it's just a very, very, very small amount. It couldn't cause a problem, but I can't necessarily agree with that. And I don't know. With the studies, I'd have to read those and with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that there was third-party testing. And so, like I say, controversial. So I love medical history. If we all remember Alice in the Wonderland, we had the Mad Hatters, and I never, when I was a little girl, knew what a Mad Hatter was until I grew up and learned about mercury toxicity. But during the 18th through the 20th century, hat makers used mercury to stiffen your felt hats. So they were breathing in and being through their skin exposed to mercury. They got very toxic with chronic mercury exposure. They got psychotic, they got excitable, they got irritable, they got aggressive, they had tremors. And so it was very common that the hatters in those phase, when in that time period, were phrased as mad as a hatter. And that's where the Mad Hatters was born. The mercury that was used in the hats continued until about 1941. So if any of y'all were in here born before 1941, you could have been exposed possibly to mercury. Again, it's going to cause bone effects on the osteoclast and osteoblast, just giving you my references in my studies. It occurs in 3 forms, and I don't really need to go through the detail of elemental versus inorganic salts and organic compounds. It comes from your industrial mining, smelting, and this was interesting to me. The mercury that's in the water can be converted by a specific bacteria into organic mercury, which is more toxic, and this occurs within fish. So that's why I say you have to be careful about how much fish. If you eat fish every day of the week, 7 days a week, you will most likely be mercury toxic, even though you don't taste it. But it's within this ocean and the water, and it's within the air, and that's what the fish breathe. So elemental mercury is at room temperature. You get it absorbed by your body through vapor. It doesn't really do well in your GI system. It causes a lot of havoc. The inorganic kinds, again, are poorly absorbed through the GI system, but can be very caustic. And then dermal exposure, if you get it exposed from a broken thermometer, results in toxicity. The organic portion, even though it's called organic, we're not talking organic food, it's an organic metal. It's lipid soluble, which means it's well absorbed through the GI system and your lungs and your skin. That's why those vapors are so concerning. And it crosses the placenta into breast milk. So if you have a daughter who's breastfeeding, if she has mercury toxicity, it could go potentially to your child. These types of vapor inhalations will cause something called acute necrotizing bronchitis, pneumonitis, and even death. And then long-term exposures affect the central nervous system. So again, the Mad Hatters type symptoms that people have. They get a tremor, they get red palms and red all over their body. They get forgetful, they get insomnia, they start to salivate. And then this is the last one, the inorganic mercury, which causes a lot of GI systems, mucosal barrier breakdowns to help the kidneys with absorbing it and getting rid of it. And then Pink's disease is a very rare thing. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it. I didn't really know too much about it, but Pink's disease is literally where your foot or your face or your hands look pink, and it's because of mercury toxicity, because it affects the dermal layer of your skin. Okay, sorry, last one. Organic mercury, it's a teratogen, which means it causes, when you're pregnant in utero, it can cause chromosomal abnormalities. So it's very important. Most moms are asymptomatic, and it can still severely affect your infants, even if your mom's asymptomatic. Infants may appear normal at birth, but psychomotor retardation, blindness, deafness, and seizures can develop over time. Okay, so similar ways that we test is we do a urine collection. You can also do a blood collection. And then the most important and effective treatment is going to be identify where you're getting exposed to mercury from and get that out of your environment. And then the chelating agents, as we said, DMSA. How do we prevent mercury toxicity? A lot of these compounds are no longer sold in the United States, like your old school thermometers. I don't know if you could still get those at CVS or Walgreens. I don't think so, but I remember them as a kid. You can have mercury spills. If you do have an old thermometer and it breaks, don't try and soak it up with a bounce or a paper towel. Put it on roll it on a sheet of paper and put it in an airtight container so you don't inhale the vapors of it. Do not vacuum it, because that will disperse it all throughout your house. And then consult with an environmental specialist who is a cleaning company that deals with large spills. And state advisories occur in the public to limit or avoid consumption or eating of certain fish. in specific areas of the bodies of water. So it could be the Pacific, it could be the Gulf, it could be the Atlantic, and they'll tell you what types of fish. And usually it's your fish that are older, like sharks. If it's a fish that's been out for a long time, living much longer, versus small things like anchovies and such. The main reason we're going to be doing testing to see if you have heavy metal toxicity is to figure out, number one, are you toxic? If you are toxic, what are you toxic with? Is it everything or one specific metal? How bad is it, or it shouldn't be how low is it, it's how high is it? And then how well are their detox systems functioning? There are many variables of why someone can and cannot detox well. When I say detox, I'm not talking alcohol and drug detox. When you need to go detox, it means what are you doing to support your physiology of how you daily detoxify? Your hair and nails grow, you breathe, you defecate, you urinate, are you hydrated? There's multiple things that help with detoxing. And then this is a lab report that shows the heavy metal toxicity. Again, there's a lot and it's kind of hard to read, but this is aluminum, antimony, arsenic, barium, beryllium, bismuth, cadmium, cesium, gadolinium, lead, mercury, nickel, palladium, platinum, tellurium, thallium, thorium, tin, tungsten, and uranium. Okay? And so your big players are always going to usually be lead, mercury, aluminum. And so when you're in this red zone, that's when you're considered very toxic. And then we also do on our lab test a mineral analysis, because you have to have good minerals to help you pull these toxins out. If you're deficient because of heavy metals in zinc or calcium or phosphorus or selenium, then we can see that on these tests. And this one shows chromium was a very low level. Chromium is very important for diabetes risk factors. And then again, we're getting back into treatments. There are many ways to treat, and chelation is the process or the removal of heavy metals. There are herbals that you can use, and those are considered safe and effective provided you don't have an allergy to it, and they're cheap. We all love our Mexican food here and our guacamole, and I say put as much cilantro in it as you want, because cilantro is a good herb that helps with mercury detoxification. There's chlorella, there's spirulina. These are natural supplements you can purchase, or you can eat these types of foods, and that'll help you detox. And then there's pharmaceuticals, DMSA, which is an oral pill that you take. It is more effective than the herbals, but it does have a cost to it, and it requires a doctor's appointment, and a visit, and a prescription. And then there's DMPS and EDTA. Those are IVs where you have to come into the office and see a nurse and get an infusion. But they're very effective at getting the levels down. All right, questions? That was kind of a lot in a short amount of time. Yes?
I have a couple. Tungsten. My husband wears a tungsten ring. Is he getting much exposure with that ring?
Possibly. I mean, the only way you know is you'd have to, test them and see. I mean, there's no way to guess. But I don't see tungsten. I do see tungsten, not as common as lead or mercury, but it's a possibility.
Okay, secondly, I had heard that you could get heavy metal poisoning through just listening to your cell phone. Is that true?
Possibly. I mean, within your cell phone, you have different types of chips and metals and wires and batteries, so it's possible, but I don't have any way to prove that. The cell phone companies are not going to let you do that kind of study. Too much conflict of interest.
Lastly, cilantro. I just crave cilantro. Or when I go to a Mexican restaurant and eat your chips, I ask for a little bowl of
Side cilantro. Yeah.
And I put a little bit of the sauce in it. I love that. So does that mean
It's helping you with getting mercury detox.
does that mean I'm toxic and I
No, not necessarily. I mean, it's a food, but it's an herb. It's a flavor. It's a seasoning. I mean, it's a natural thing that.
mean that my body's ready to cut it?
Not necessarily. No.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you recommend a saliva test for chronic? Because what I had, my background, and that's why I came tonight, is I had like 7 fillings removed and they didn't do it correctly. And I have insomnia. I have trouble with my nails.
Check the symptoms.
I mean, I have
Yeah.
a lot of symptoms. So, what I've read, know, and studied a little bit, is that blood tests don't always show everything when it's chronic.
That's true. That's true. Blood tests, if you are high on blood tests, you are acutely toxic, and that is an issue. Most of your metals are stored in the tissue and inside your cells. So what I tell patients is most of our tests, you can do blood tests, you can do saliva tests, you can do a little hair mineral and metal analysis, and you can do urine. I prefer urine just because I think it's more accurate, but hair test is simple. If I wanted to test a kid, I just, take a little off in the back and send it off and see on a long-term period how much metal has been growing out of their hair. But to me, the urine is the most effective. But if I told a patient, oh yeah, just go pee in a cup for me and let's see if you have metals, it may come back negative, and that doesn't necessarily mean you don't have metals. It's because they're probably stuck in your bones and in your cells, and they're not actively coming out. That's why that chelation process is important.
So you don't have to get a baseline before you do chelation? Wouldn't you have to get a test showing how much toxicity you have before you do chelation?
Well, yeah, so that's what I'm saying, though. You can just urinate in a cup and it may not look like you have any metals, but I'm not convinced of that because I've seen such a high percentage of patients once they take a chelator. So for instance, if I saw you and you said, I want to check and see if I have heavy metals, I may go, well, do you want to do an IV or do you want to do an oral, and discuss the differences between that. And then you say, I want to do oral because it's easy and I don't want to drive to Dallas and see you, and let's just do it that way. So you would take 3 pills of oral DMSA and then you would collect your urine. That would give you a more accurate show of what's physically coming out of your body.
I read on a discussion under Dr. David Perlmutter, an neurologist, they had a discussion about using alpha lipoic acid, and that the blood level you had to, if you were using it for detoxification to increase your glutathione, that you had to keep your blood level up like overnight, or the toxins would go back into your brain tissue.
Yeah, we do all those IVs, glutathione. We recommend glutathione supplement because that's one of the #1 things that supports your liver and detoxifying every toxin in general. So we do IV glutathione, we do IV ALA or alpha lipoic acid, we do phosphatidylcholine. We do these things because patients need them. There are specific nutrient IVs that help heal the nervous system and the brain. So if they've got brain fog or they've got some kind of brain issue or neuropathy symptoms, that will help. And we also give them IVs of minerals because your chelators will also pull your minerals out. So you need to be taking certain mineral supplements to help keep your minerals high, or else you're going to be calling me saying, I got night cramps and foot cramps and restless leg, and something's changing. So there's a balance to it. But I will tell you, with dentists that have done mercury, it's a very specialized thing. You don't want to, unfortunately, and no offense to my father, you don't want to just go to just a regular dentist and get your metal taken out.
That could happen, and I swallow it and everything.
Yeah, there's risk associated with that. So there is a company or an association. They're called IOAMT, the International, I think I've got it right, International Association of Oral Medicine and Toxicology, IAOMT. And they were here in Dallas literally the week before COVID, March 6th, 2020, and they did a wonderful talk between the dentist and the physicians about heavy metals and how to get those out. And so there's usually functional, integrative, or what we call biological dentists that are trained to take metals out and replace them. I mean, all these things add up. Dentists are not cheap. New crowns and root canals and taking fillings out and replacing them, it's expensive. It adds up. But long-term risk associated with cost of long-term living and Alzheimer's and a hip fracture and morbidity, mortality goes up. So you kind of have to weigh.
Get a crown or something like that when they're drilling that stuff out. Is that?
If there's a metal amalgam, there's always a risk you can absorb. And the mouth is the tongue is an extremely absorbable organ. That's why if you think you have a heart attack, get your baby aspirin, crush it and eat it and put it on your tongue because it gets absorbed so quickly. So yeah, there's always a risk of that. But the biological dentist, and what I was telling her is they use specific dams and things that help with suction and ventilation so that you're not just swallowing and absorbing metals in your mouth. Yes.
I am kind of lazy, so I use
make pans out of aluminum foil
Mhm.
to broil my steaks in. Is that just the worst thing in the world?
Yeah, should we quit using aluminum foil?
No, I'm not going to say that. We start getting into these conversations. Is it ceramic or glass, or is it the stainless steel or the aluminum foil? I'm not. There's nothing that I can say. Yes, this would be showing, or Le Creuset, or whatever your expensive stuff is. They are made of metals, and there is a concern that it could leach. But I'm not saying you shouldn't cook your food or cover it with aluminum foil or bake it.
If you read anything like Dr. Gressel, we got rid of all our aluminum cookware.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we use aluminum foil, and I thought, well, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't use this either.
Yeah. Well, even more so than that, you want to look at your sunscreens and your deodorants.
Oh, we did that years ago.
Yeah.
Like, I know deodorants, right? Aluminum is a real.
Oh yeah. All you have to do is go to CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, wherever you want to go. Go buy your Degree, your Sure, your Secret, your Dove, your Old Spice Men's, whatever the regular deodorants are. Just turn it over and look at the ingredients. The first ingredients is usually going to be titanium. And so we're just getting it through our armpits. Yes.
Could there be exposure through, I have a topical exposure to Roundup spray last April, and I'm still dealing with it topically. But now I'm having other stuff going on, and I'm not sure.
Oh yeah. Roundup's it's a bad thing. Yeah.
Once a day to remind me.
Yeah, pesticides are loaded, so you just have to be careful. I really, again, environmentally try to push natural pesticides, and we have to think about these things. There's termites, there's weeds that we don't want in our yard. We don't want rats, we don't want rodents, we don't want any of those things. But what you spray in your house and spray on your lawn, you will get exposed to it, and you have to think about if you have a little grandchild that's crawling on your floor and they're spraying it. He'll just get it absorbed through his hands, and when he puts his hands in his mouth, if you walk outside in your backyard and you sprayed it with Roundup and all these, True Lawn type of treatments, and you walk out there barefoot, you're going to absorb it. So.
When I go walking and I see the little sign in someone's yard, I walk a different route.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Yeah.
breathing it, that stuff is so dangerous.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Y'all seem very educated and informed about this. Yes.
If we get fish, is there some way to treat it before you eat it?
Maybe put some cilantro on it.
You might mention it's the large fish.
It is.
In general, stay away from large fish.
Yes. Most of, again, tuna, salmon, generally those don't live for months here. I'm not a fish person. I'll eat it a little bit, but I'm not an expert in fish.
Stay away
So.
from albacore and yellowfish.
Right, and shark and things that are very in the water a lot longer. Whales.
What about lobster?
Have you heard about
I don't.
like an oligo scan for detecting? Because I did this 4 or 5 years ago. Basically, you put your hand on this device,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's like an energy frequency. Yeah, that. Now I can't explain it. It's kind of woo-woo, but I have had patients say, I did that, and that told me I had parasites, or that told me I had a metal, or that told me I had mold, or that told me I had a food sensitivity or a hormone problem. I don't know, but if the patients believe it and the patients get diagnosed with something and they get treated and they get better, then they're going to be a believer. So yeah.
Deal with adrenal
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
stuff, because I've done a little bit of studying on that too, and that, I bet all this could be.
Yeah, so your adrenals are glands that sit on top of your kidneys, and that's the steroid producer. We all have steroids just as a natural thing that's produced. Now, if you strain your back, or you need a steroid shot, or you get a sinus infection and you do well with steroids to decrease the inflammation, that's okay. But long-term use of steroids can cause fractures, bone thinning, diabetes, you name it. But we naturally produce steroids, and when we're living in a stressed out world, and we're worried and fighting and arguing and stressed out just in general, and don't like I-35 traffic and whatever else, then our adrenal glands produce more cortisol. And cortisol is a natural steroid hormone that's within our bodies that comes from our adrenal glands. And when it gets too high, we get adrenal problems, and then you can burn out, and then you're exhausted.
Do you test the adrenals?
Oh yeah.
You have
Mm-hmm.
tests, okay.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
article I read by Dr. Daniel Pompa,
Uh-huh.
from
Yes.
ASM, he talked about if you get the heavy metal exposure, and then it would get into your brain, it would upset the HPA axis,
The
and that, like I have insomnia, waking up at 3 to 4 every night, and they said that's what happened to him, that's one of his first clues, that he was waking up, because it upset your adrenal glands, that whole cycle.
Yeah, the body is very complex. There's tons of different hormonal glands, the HPA axis, your thyroid gland, your adrenal gland, your pancreas for diabetes. All these, and your brain secretes stuff that causes your bones to regenerate and renew. It's a very complicated system, but yes, if you get toxic, your whole body gets stressed out, whether it's from an infection like COVID or strep or staph or pneumonia, or if you got into a fight with your husband, or if you lost a loved one, or if you hate your job, or if you have to drive on 35 for 3 hours a day, or financial problem, whatever it is, those types of stressors will create problems, and metals can do it. Metals exactly go straight to your brain as well, not just your bones, and that's where people get the Mad Hatters.
What about Epstein-Barr? The metals can cause?
Well, I mean, Epstein-Barr is a virus. I don't directly say that metals cause Epstein-Barr or Epstein-Barr causes heavy metal toxicity, but there are tons of patients that have Epstein-Barr, a very high percentage in the United States and in the world. Yeah. Yes.
How do you test for high cortisol levels?
You can do blood tests, or you can do saliva testing. And cortisol fluctuates throughout the day, so it's usually very high in the morning when you wake up, the sun's shining, you're ready to go start your day, do your thing that you're supposed to do in life, and then as the sun goes down, the cortisol goes down and your melatonin goes up. That's why you get sleepy. So if you have a poor circadian rhythm, if I worked nights and didn't come home till 6 a.m. and worked 10 to 6, and then my circadian rhythm would be off, I may have problems sleeping. But it'll affect your adrenals as well. Yes.
How about iron and steel? Is that a problem?
Well, so iron is a mineral that you have to have. I mean, that's what helps you produce hemoglobin and carry oxygen.
Working with iron and steel, like drills and stuff like that.
Well, you can have iron toxicity. Iron it's a balance. You don't want to be too low in iron, and if you're working in iron, you can have iron toxicity as well.
Steel too?
Yep. Any other questions? Okay.
No, but I can speak for the environmental health clinic since I've been a patient since 1999. I did buy a house and the roofing company didn't put the furnace stack back together, and I didn't know it. Ended up with carbon monoxide poisoning. That led to liver jaundice and mercury blood poisoning. And every time the dentist did what he did to you, then my mercury poisoning was way up there. So you go and do the chelation, and you must have the mineral IV the next day, or you could be a basket case, because as you said, it drains it out of you. So they do a lot of very good things. And in Beverly Hills, the apartment, which I didn't know, I got really, really sick, and I knew enough from here to there to get a holistic MD. So I had lead poisoning and copper toxicity. And I didn't know till I went back a couple years later. This guy, we won't mention names, but he said, "Remember when you were sick?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "Well, the city water got mixed in with the residential water in a few area blocks in Beverly Hills." I said, "Well, that's why I was sick." And then, of course, the landlord died, so we sold the building and moved. So we never knew. But sometimes when you're sick, you don't know what to do except for that. But I would turn the water on, and you just don't think, because I had the carbon dioxide poisoning in my house here, the mercury blood poisoning. And then I go there, and you're a little basket case, and then you turn on the water, and what comes out from the water? It's
Lead.
orangey
Yeah,
brown.
lead.
But when it goes away, you think you're okay. No.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend
Oh, thank you.
my doctor, Seymour.
Okay. Any other questions?
I've got one.
Yes.
Is there some kind of metal in the newer light bulbs? And is that why you have to dispose of them?
I
carefully and
think
correctly?
so. You're talking about the LED lights. I do think so, compared to the incandescent, which you can't even hardly find those anymore. So yeah, I do think there is. I'm not exactly sure which one though.
I
But
wanna say it's mercury, but
It-
I'm
it
not
may be.
sure about that.
it may be. What's that?
I've heard that you don't break them because it will.
Yeah. So, I mean, just imagine if you were reaching up on your counter or your cabinet and oops, one broke. How do you fix that? You don't just want to sweep it up and vacuum and say, go on with our day.
You're supposed to call the hazard, it says on the box. but
Yeah.
people would.
Does, insurance cover your testing or something?
So that's the sad thing. Insurance, and that's the fight we've fought with for a long time, especially Medicare, unfortunately. There's a lot of things they do not cover. You could have, I don't know, honestly, if you went to the ER with acute, like if you were like our Afghan soldier and you had acute problems, now granted he's under the VA and has different benefits, but if you just on regular Medicare or regular insurance and you went to the ER and you had a toxic level, I don't even know then, because we diagnose patients. It says heavy metal toxicosis or toxicity or lead poisoning or mercury poisoning based on objective data of the labs that we're testing, and even then sometimes they won't cover it. You could have a nutrient deficiency, or you could have a food allergy, and we could be doing allergy testing on you and desensitization treatment with allergy shots, and they still wouldn't cover it. I mean, it's a fight every day. But yeah, unfortunately. So
They do turn it in for you at the front desk.
we do. Patients will pay cash up front, and then we have billers that bill Medicare, and Medicare does cover your phone visits and your telemedicine and some allergy testing and maybe some IVs, but most of our IVs are more than just hydration. They're nutrients or they're chelation, and so sometimes they don't cover that. So it just depends how platinum and good your insurance is, or how much you want to fight with them, because I take myself out of that. We try to code and do the best that we can, and the rest is up to our billers and to you and your choice of insurance. So
Speaking
yes.
Last question. 'cause
You're good.
I want to come into your office to ask a lot more.
Okay.
But can I put dibs on one of those 4 cards?
Yes, I'll give it to you. Yes.
I'm serious.
We'll save you one.
Yes, I have one. I'll give you one.
You want a question?
Yes.
During COVID, I heard about IV centers
Uh-huh.
around town and such. Is that thing new? And I think I also read where you can bring your own whatever you want, to have in your IV and that.
Oh yeah, it's like at a you just pick what you want. Those are like drip stations or IVs, and especially during COVID, people were sick and they didn't want to get out, but you could go to places like medical facilities and IV infusion centers, and they don't give medications, but they'll give nutrients like vitamin C or glutathione or magnesium or a mineral IV. There's a tons of them.
Getting in their IV.
Yeah, the B complex, B vitamins.
Vitamin C.
And so they'll have little, cute things like, are you hormonal, or can you not sleep, or do you have muscle pain, or do you just want the works and you're tired, and just give you the whole kitchen sink. We have one called the works at our office, and it is the kitchen sink, it's the works. So.
Do you recommend those pads that you can put on your feet that are supposed to?
Oh, the detoxing pad?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll tell you. I personally did buy some of those. I put them on every once in a while. I don't know if they work, but yeah, they're weird kind of like stick-on pads on your soles, and apparently you're supposed to detox a lot through your feet and through the palms or the soles of your feet. So, as long as you don't get a rash or have a bad adverse reaction or a side effect, I don't think it's going to hurt you. But I honestly don't know how effective that is at really pulling metals out.
Oh, okay.
So.
Do you recommend reverse osmosis water?
Yes and no. So reverse osmosis is the cleanest, and you can start with simple things like a Berkey, which is just it looks like almost like a tall coffee stand, and you pour it with water, and it has a filter in it, and you just take your water from there. Some people say, well, I have a refrigerator filter. Better than nothing, but still not very good. And then you can have whole house, or just under the kitchen sink, or if you want the whole house treated, you can do a whole house reverse osmosis. It's expensive. It's thousands of dollars, and you have to be careful because some of those filters will pull the natural minerals out of your water, so you're basically drinking distilled water, which is why it's so important that you replace it with good minerals, either a mineral pill or a mineral powder. Because again, you'll start to have the cramps and all the mineral deficiencies. So Yes and no. You definitely, I had this conversation on Monday with a patient who had heavy metal toxicity. He's going to buy a $7,000 reverse osmosis for his house. And I was like, okay. And me and my colleague were talking, and he said, well, you're going to lose minerals. And I said, I think I would rather lose minerals and replace those than I would deal with the toxic effects of toxic water. Because, water is life, just like oxygen. We got to have it. And it needs to be clean. It is cleaner than, certain places south, but there's still risk associated with it.
Well, there is a little store here in Carrollton that does reverse osmosis water.
Oh, they
You
do?
can buy it.
What are they called? Do you know?
What's it called? Aquabella.
Oh, okay.
You can buy it
What
like
is it?
5-gallon.
Aquabella?
It's by Albertsons.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, it's just water that you can buy there, or they'll deliver it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
It's like $4 for 5 gallons
Yeah.
of water.
Yeah. Water's going up just like everything else. Yes, sir.
I believe Hannah Kruger is the one you want to look at for what you were looking at, the comments that were being made.
About the dentist?
About the blood,
The testing saliva versus hair versus urine versus blood?
well, that, and also just Bob Beck was another one on blood. If you're concerned about these silly things, EMFs are studied in Norway and Sweden, so you can find reports, you can learn all about these, and you will bury them in the backyard.
Oh, the phone.
And the same with the headsets that you're,
Yeah.
the virtual headsets and all that.
Yeah.
I got a 15-year-old, I can't get him off of it. He sleeps with this by his head, and
Yeah.
his dad, mom won't do anything about it.
Yeah, at minimum, tell them to put it on an airplane and don't sleep next to it. Put it, not even on the nightstand, put it away from you. Because there are, whether or not we want to acknowledge it, there are major health effects with cell phones. You may not be able to see the electromagnetic fields, but there are certain patients that can feel it, and it's important. You can look on your cell phones and see the disclaimer on there that what it says. You should not hold it, I don't know how many millimeters to your head, but
And the
it's
same,
on there.
even the Bose headsets, noise canceling.
Oh yeah, the earbuds, all those things.
The only time I would wear those would be on an airplane, just simply because, along with earplugs, because of the
Yeah.
pitch noise.
And I'm not against, using a cell phone. Obviously social life and ordering my groceries and navigating to get here and what's the weather and what's the traffic and, I use it to work, I use it to communicate, I use it to do everything. But I've learned a lot in the years that I've been at the Environmental Health Center. I don't sleep with it near me. It's powered off. I don't use earbuds. Everything's corded. If I talk on the phone, it's on speaker away from me. You just do the things naturally to try and help decrease your exposures. But this is something that my mentor, Dr. Ray, William J. Ray, or Bill Ray, he sat down with me before he passed away in 2018, and he said, hey kiddo, in my generation, it was tobacco. We had to go up against the tobacco industry, and there was, he's a quack, and this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. No, he wasn't. And it finally came out, the truth, that it causes heart attacks, strokes, cancers. You don't want to smoke when you're having a baby because it could cause premature deliveries and small babies, and et cetera, et cetera. And here we are now with something that, it's not like, hey, ma'am, don't smoke because I don't like the smell of it or it makes me sick. Everybody has cell phones, so we can't control it.
So I was a flight attendant, 36 years, and when smoking was permitted on airplanes, I was tested by National Jewish, and I was a secondhand smoker,
Essentially.
and I had never smoked in my entire life.
Yeah.
Also, I buried 2 friends with cancer, so I went down all these rabbit holes with both of them, and there's an alternative cancer seminar that's held in September in Los Angeles at the Sheraton. And that's where all of this information from all over the world comes and is available to you.
Yeah.
That you can find online and everything.
Yeah, we're basically peeling the layers of the onion back. one, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Her biometric machine that she has right over here is one of the best things that you can use.
Yeah.
For as long as she lets you you use them.
Yeah.
Because, my friend had a Rife machine,
Mhm.
and we spent 8 hours a day for 5 days on and two off, and it was the Royal Rife machine from Resonant Technologies, the Pearl
Mhm.
EDRL-M, $6,000 machine. Well, her cancerous bones, which never heal, was healing twice as fast.
Mhm.
Her eyebrows, which had been dyed, went back to her natural brunette color. My gray hair was turning back to my natural dark blonde. Because I was within the 25-foot radius.
Yeah.
So there are all kinds of.
It's like the Tesla of medicine, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then the device he's talking about, a biocharger on the other side, it has 4 different types of energy: light, sound, voltage, and PEMF. And there's a red tube in the middle that is in fact a Tesla coil, and it's pushing PEMF energy, earth-based energy, to improve circulation, increase cellular voltage, all that. It's pretty futuristic looking, a little woo-woo.
Mhm.
Extremely cool.
However, we know, our generation knows, because Ella Fitzgerald sang the note that shattered the glass in the Memorex commercial. And that's exactly what's happening with her machine and with the Rife machine that Resonant Technologies has.
Mhm.
It speaks to resonance within yourself.
Yeah. And the important thing about chelation to be aware of is you won't find many conventional doctors, if any, that do it, just because they're not. I was not trained in it. Board certified in family medicine, 2009. Never really learned about chelation. Didn't know other specialists that did it. But I worked with Dr. William J. Ray. He was a cardiothoracic surgeon in the 60s. Well, in the 60s, guess what they didn't have? Lipitor and cholesterol medicine. So how did you clean the blood and clear the arteries? If you're a cardiothoracic surgeon, you chelated. So that's how I, God divine, I got to meet him and work with him and took over his legacy, and it's extremely important. But again, a lot of doctors just don't even acknowledge it or aware of it. You get controversies with vaccines and all these other things. And
Steve McQueen went to Mexico and had all of his blood replaced.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the ways that he lived longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's answers out there. You just got to dig. So.
I'll be happy at the Environmental Health Clinic.
Yes.
Do plastics have anything in them?
Oh, you're going to open up the plastic. Yes. Yes. Let's just. Yeah, especially if they're in the sun, they leach BPA, and it doesn't matter if they say, well, it's BPA-free baby bottles. It's a different type of BPB or BPP. It's a different type of plastic. So you'll see a lot of the environmental patients walking around with glass bottles. But again, you have to be realistic. If I'm a mom, I'm not going to give a 2-year-old a glass bottle. So.
But it does leach out different stuff.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I say you.
We finally got away, because all of our members would come in, we had these cute little bottles we gave out and going through 1,000 a month. And I thought, well, that's not very green for the environment. And there's those plastic things. So then we brought in the reverse osmosis water fountain right over there. No touch, cleaned up across the board. Yeah. Get rid of those little plastics.
And you don't put them in a microwave.
Oh, no.
Or the freezer.
No plastic.
I just bought a Stanley one of those
Is there
big
safe distance for
bottle, to drink out of, and I think it's stainless steel.
I have stainless steel.
Those are the Yetis and all those other ones.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
What's the point of putting my reverse osmosis water in?
You could put it in glass and then put your little mineral powder in there, or take your mineral pill, and then you're good.
So you shouldn't use stainless steel?
Well, so everybody was on the big Yeti kick. Those are there's iron and iron ore and stainless steel and other types of metals in there. And I mean, I don't know. I haven't done a study on Yeti cups and nothing to begrudge or talk bad about Yeti, but everybody likes their cute designs and whatever their personality is on their cups.
And probably made in China.
Well,
Which is even another.
we'll be dealing with those very
So BPA-free doesn't really mean that.
Well, it means it's BPA free, but it's not the other types of bisphenol phenol type plastics. I had a friend that worked in the plastic company, and he was like, well, you know, BPA free, it could be BPB, BPP, there's many different types. They don't have to disclose it. It's there's no transparency.
So stainless, like stainless steel.
Again, that's where you're getting into Le Creuset and all these expensive and, you know, you have to cook your food on something. It's very hard to find glass things to boil your water, and so it is what it is. Do I think that is something that causes toxicity from everyday use? Probably not as much as it would be eating fish or drinking water that's contaminated, or, you know, the environmental things. Right. But is it a potential? Yeah. Could it? Yeah. But I don't directly. I've only had about one patient that said she thought it was her cookware. So.
Well, I think it was a not to cook.
So if a patient comes to see you and they're kind of wondering about all this, what is the process?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I'm at the Environmental Health Center in Dallas. We're actually located in Richardson, and our website is just EHCD. It's the acronym for Environmental Health Center Dallas, ehcd.com. You can call our office. Our phone number's on there. And Sue is the lady who is my patient coordinator. So if you're a new patient, and I've already told them I'm going to be speaking at OsteoStrong, there's like 30 people. They may be calling saying, I want to see Dr. Seymour. She knows what to do, but you'll talk with Sue, and Sue will give you our pricing and kind of expectations and when my next appointment is available and how much does that cost and how much is chelation. We want to give you all the information so you can make an informed decision.
And you start normally with blood work and urinalysis?
Well, we start with just, getting the patient-doctor relationship started and hearing what are your concerns, what's your history, and then from there we'll start to, if you want to do a heavy metal chelation, we have to decide, do you want to do oral pills or IV? If you're concerned and have a medication sensitivity, we do skin testing for medications to see if you're going to be having a bad tolerance to it or an adverse reaction. We have a lot of safety mechanisms in place to make sure that people have the best experience with it. So.
You mentioned you fight with Medicare.
Every doctor does.
Does Medicare cover you? Do they take?
They cover. So I'm considered what's called non-participating in Medicare, which doesn't mean I've opted out, but I don't accept something called assignment. So when patients come and see us, let's say I have a $125 consultation fee, then you have to write a check or pay cash or credit card for your $125, and then my staff, I pay my billers to send your information to Medicare and to bill Medicare. Then Medicare, in a roundabout way, will pay you back and say, what's your name? Kathy. They'll say, here, Kathy, you get $100 on the $125 because that's how much we cover for Dr. Seymour or for, this office visit. But the IVs and such generally are not covered. And I could even say, oh, she's got acute mercury toxicity. We need to chelate her. It's a fight with them to get them to cover those things. So just being upfront and transparent.
I kind of question. For the patient that receive chemo, they're highly toxic.
Cisplatin and those types of, yeah.
Did you have any post-treatment for those?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, when people get diagnosed with cancer, that's the last thing they ever want to do is go through cancer again. They don't want chemo, they don't want radiation, they don't want the scare of death and their morbidity and their mortality and what's going to happen and am I going to die and where am I going to go, and it's just an emotional, traumatic thing. So by the time they come and see us, we do lots of things. We do immune supports, we do IV nutrition if you're malnourished. Chemo has a lot of side effects. We do, they get brain fog, or the chemo brain as they call it. They can't think. A lot of that is from the chemicals trying to poison the tumor or the cancer cells, but there are risks associated with that. So if you get through it and you want to be back on the road to health, be happy to see you and happy to help.
Yeah, I got a niece that is going to the treatment right now for breast cancer, so I need your card.
Yes,
The
okay.
full
One, two, okay.
Chemo and radiation the same? I don't know nothing about it.
No. Chemo is either pills or IVs that you get. They're medications that kill cancer cells, and then radiation is like high electromagnetic field frequencies.
My husband just went through 10 doses of it, but Medicare would only pay for
he needed 15. Medicare would only pay for 10.
See?
So they pushed whatever medication was here into him, so he got 1.5 doses each time. What were they putting in him? I have no idea.
Well, I mean, I don't know either, but if it was a chemo, it was a medication.
No, well, it was radiation.
If it was radiation, then they're doing a targeted blast of like a laser through your body of radiation.
Is that a good thing, though? I mean, I don't know.
They surely would have told you the risk and benefits associated
Well,
with that, yeah.
He's got cancer.
That's the problem with cancer. There's only...
It's horrible and it's awful and it's hurting him.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. There's only 3 options, though, or 4. Do nothing, do chemo, do surgery, or do radiation. And depending on what type of cancer you have, you may not have surgery.
Well, this is the thing. Most of the things won't help with this. Is this renal cancer, and nothing helps it. Nothing helps.
Yeah.
That's what Farrah Fawcett had.
Did she?
Oh, she had animal cancer.
Yeah. So yeah, well, happy to help you. Yes.
So much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for coming out.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank y'all. All right, let me disconnect here and I'll pass out my only 4 cards.
I'll look you up online.
I just thought about it when I came over, so that's